Environmental sustainable policies and procedures. Sustainability gained wider recognition when scientists and scholars began discussing how economic practices and population growth were impacting the world's environment. They coined the term sustainable development, which advocates that sustained economic growth is possible without destroying and degrading the natural environment. Unsustainable activities have led to changes in our environment or have been identified as having the potential to lead to future changes. The types of changes that are occurring or are predicted to occur form the key issues for sustainability. Key sustainability issues can be global and/or local, such as climate and atmosphere, land, ecosystems and biodiversity, water quality, waste disposal, and natural resource management. Ecologically sustainable development is a major challenge for Australia. It is critical that Australia use its resources to develop industry and generate employment and thus meet the needs of Australians today, and that it use environmental resources in a way which maintains and where possible improves their range, variety and quality, while concurrently doing this in a way that conserves the ecosystem for the benefit of future generations. Apparently, we are well on the way to doing this, but as new technologies emerge, things need to be re-evaluated. The government is amending the Australian environmental regulatory requirements, which includes large-scale wind farms and which subjects them to these requirements at each phase of the project. Thus, it is possible for sustainability and sustainable development to be used to balance competing interests and needs. To do this effectively, it is important to consider sustainable work practices and their management. Sustainable work practices include practices that conserve natural resources, minimize or eliminate pollution, are energy and economically efficient, and have a reduced impact on the health and safety of workers, communities, and the environment. What key strategies are used to manage issues? The primary role of wind farms is electricity generation from renewable resources, so it is a strong advocate for the promotion and implementation of sustainable and environmentally sound work practices. The main sustainability energy principles and practices relevant to the renewable energy industry include the Operational Environmental Management Plan, which provides a framework for controlling potential operational impacts on the environment and which includes practical and achievable performance requirements, mitigation strategies, monitoring systems, reporting and auditing processes, and processes for implementing corrective action. Environmental monitoring programs should include all activities that have been identified to have potentially significant impacts on the environment, both during normal operation and during unusual conditions, and should be based on direct and indirect indicators of emissions, effluents, and resource use, and be conducted by qualified personnel, following best practice monitoring and record-keeping procedures, and using properly calibrated and maintained equipment. Using renewable energy sources and reducing and effectively managing commodities such as energy and water. Researching and adopting emerging technologies, including using energy-efficient devices or appliances to minimize energy consumption. Wherever possible, employing waste minimization strategies. Remember, these also have economic benefits and reduce operational costs. Let's look at some specific issues related to wind farms. Wind farm activities have the potential to result in environmental impacts on the physical environment that are related to the landscape and visual impacts, noise, biodiversity, shadow flicker, and water quality. Wind farms may have a visual impact on viewscapes, especially where located near residential areas and tourism sites. Visual impacts are generally related to the installed and operational turbines. During the planning phase, the location, layout, number of wind turbines, and associated infrastructure included in the wind farm should be assessed. This may include the proximity to residential areas, the character of the surrounding landscape and seascapes, and an assessment of important biodiversity and cultural heritage features and sites that may be affected. It is important to obtain community input on the wind farm's layout and siting. Maintain a uniform size and design of the turbines in terms of the type of tower and height. Minimize the presence of ancillary structures on the site by minimizing site infrastructure, keeping the number of roads to a minimum, burying collector system power lines, and avoiding stockpiling of excavated materials and construction debris, and removing inoperable turbines. Erosion, compaction of soil, and significant weather events, for example, which occur after periods of high rainfall, can affect the condition of the land and civil assets at wind farms. Implement appropriate erosion measures. Clear land promptly and revegetate with local seed stock of native species. Noise can occur during the construction and operational phases. Construction noise can occur from blasting, piling, construction of roads, turbine foundations, and erection of turbines. This is of key importance to those living nearby. Noise-specific guidelines regarding environmental noise impacts from wind farms are directed by planning authorities and subject wind farms to strict guidelines from such sources as regulatory requirements, environmental impact statements, environmental noise guidelines, and direct community consultation. Modelling, monitoring, and reporting are independently conducted as directed by the planning authority. Operational noise. The mechanical components of turbines produce mechanical noise that is radiated by the surface of the turbine and by openings in the nacelle housing. The interaction of air and turbine blades produces aerodynamic noise as air passes over and past the blades. Wind turbines make more noise as the wind speed increases. This also increases the overall background noise. Noise mitigation measures are mainly related to engineering design standards and turbine siting. Mechanical noise will continue to reduce as the airfoil designs improve. When the wind farm is operational, it is important to monitor noise and adhere to noise guideline values. This helps verify the modelled noise levels at nearby properties and confirms how effective current mitigation strategies are. Wind farms have the potential to create adverse impacts on flora and fauna. The impact may be direct or indirect and may occur during the construction, operational, and decommissioning stages. Consent must be sought from management when native vegetation needs to be disturbed or has been damaged. One way to minimise this is by restricting vehicles to existing made tracks and roadways. When activities have damaged natural vegetation, this can be offset through extensive native tree planting. The location of turbines may affect wildlife in many ways. The location may disrupt the daily movement of birds and bats. It may represent a barrier to migratory patterns of certain wildlife. The location may disturb or damage native vegetation. The infrastructure may increase the risk to certain species. Site selection has the greatest potential to avoid and minimize potential adverse impacts on biodiversity. Planning should consider the proximity of wind farms to high biodiversity value sites in the region. Surveys should be comprehensive and address the following aspects. They should identify species of flora and fauna that have high biodiversity values. They should include species with a high collision risk, such as certain soaring, aerial displaying, migratory and flocking birds, birds of prey, and migratory tree roosting and insectivorous bats. They should include species attracted to wind farms as perches or feeding areas, including those with behavioural tendencies to perch on power lines and related structures. Assess collision-related impacts to birds and bats, including searching for carcasses. Sometimes, post-construction monitoring also includes surveys of the use and movement patterns of birds and bats in order to build a more complete picture of the situation. Avoid attracting birds to predictable food sources. This is especially relevant when carrion-eating birds are present. Eliminate freewheeling when turbines are not generating power. Avoid artificial light sources where possible. White steady lights tend to attract insects, which attract predators. Avoid steady or slow blinking lights. Red or white blinking lights or pulsing lights are preferable. At all stages, it is important that the worksite is rehabilitated and kept clean. This includes controlling spills, although the size of the spill will determine the extent of rehabilitation actions needed. Some instances require that the incident is reported to the EPA. Another issue at wind farms occurs from noxious weeds and pests that must be controlled and managed. Shadow flicker occurs when the sun passes behind the turbine and casts a shadow. As the rotor blade rotates, shadows pass over the same point, causing an effect called shadow flicker. It is an increased problem when residential properties, educational or health facilities are located nearby or face the wind farm. It tends to be more pronounced in higher latitudes when the sun is lower in the sky and casts longer shadows. Previously, blade or tower glint occurred when the sun reflected off a rotor blade or tower that was at a particular orientation. Modern wind turbines are painted with a matte, non-reflective finish, so this is no longer considered a significant issue. The installation of turbine foundations, underground cables, access roads, and other ancillary infrastructure may result in erosion, soil compaction, increased runoff, and sedimentation of surface waters. Strict legislative guidelines, particularly when it comes to distribution, storage, handling, and disposal of chemicals, substances, and other potential contaminants, are followed during operation and maintenance activities conducted on a wind farm. Contamination to adjacent lands and waterways are managed by several methods, including the construction of containment structures to contain any potential minor and major leaks, implementing a spill management plan, correct disposal of waste products, and correct decontamination procedures in the event of a spill. Measures include watering or covering exposed areas. This helps minimize or prevent air pollution and dust. Works are not carried out during periods of strong winds or in weather conditions where adjacent areas could be affected by the high concentration of airborne materials and dusts. Best practice resource management includes reduce, reuse materials if possible, recycle and reprocess. Some components are repaired either on or off-site and returned to service. Reprocess if possible. All oily rags and spent gearbox oils are collected and reprocessed off-site. Waste packaging material like cardboard and pallets are collected and sent off-site for recycling. Dispose. Undertake this as a last resort, but dispose of waste where relevant as general waste. Condition monitoring and other non-destructive testing measures are employed to accurately ascertain equipment age, including laboratory-conducted oil and grease sampling, thermography, and vibration monitoring. Remember, a good guide will always be contained in the environmental checklists and ensure you know the requirements for follow-up of non-compliance. Independent third-party audits may also be a good source of information about what is happening at a specific site. Some instructions will also be contained in the JSA or JSEA, so consult the JSA or JSEA prior to starting any task. There are international environmental health and safety guidelines developed for the wind energy sector. These guidelines are comprehensive and address industry-specific impacts and management of both onshore and offshore wind farms. Remember also that significant damage can occur from a fire. General precautions have been discussed previously. It is also important to note that due to the risk of petrol-powered vehicles igniting grass fires, only diesel-powered vehicles are permitted on a wind farm.